On Sunday, May 22nd, the Nunde Historical Society held the second of a two-part series called Remembering the Flood of '72 from Whiskey Bridge to the Mount Morris Dam and along the Keshequa. This video covers the segment on the Mount Morris Dam and features Juliana Smith, who provides some background of the dam and then takes the audience through the historic flood from the viewpoint of the dam and its personnel who were tasked with handling the disaster. The presentation concludes with an informative question and answer period. The segment on the flood along the Keshequa Valley will be the topic of our next video.
So hi there, my name is Juliana Smith. I work for the Mount Morris Dam and Recreation Area, and I've been there for a little over 10 years. And I was so excited when Tom gave me this invitation to present this program, because I got to go back and rediscover some of those old logbooks and information about this historic flood event. Of course, we know it's the 50th anniversary of Hurricane Agnes coming up, and I'm pleased to be here, so thank you for hosting me. So starting out, we've got a scene from downtown Rochester from the 1865, this illustration here. So we're just sort of getting in the mode of thinking about, long ago flooding on the Lower Genesee was a relatively common occurrence. One could expect seasonal flooding from spring snow and rain, but every few years the city of Rochester would be heavily flooded by a major storm. Here we see in this illustration the flood of April 1865. This was in Harper's Weekly, and that's right in downtown Rochester on the south side of Buffalo Street. By the early 1900s, as infrastructure in the Lower Genesee Valley grew, there was greater demand for protection from flooding. The dam site was selected at the northern end of Letchworth Gorge so that the gorge itself could be used as the storage reservoir. With Gibsonville and St. Helena communities relocated, fluctuating pool levels within the gorge would not impact any other infrastructure. Construction for the Mount Morris Dam began in 1948, so just after World War II. And here there's a photo in the beginning stages of construction. You can see they've got the cofferdam up here blocking part of the river so they can begin the foundation. The area that you see highlighted in yellow is where the present-day Mount Morris Dam Visitor Center and Recreation Area are located. So you've probably been inside of that building or out on those grounds where we have the picnic area. A gravity concrete type dam was selected as the appropriate structure here. It was built with a holding capacity of over 300,000 acre feet, enough to protect against any previous flood that was on record at that point. The construction of this humongous structure was quite an undertaking. It took 4 years to complete, and during the 3 years of concrete being poured, crews worked around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 22 tons every 5 minutes for 3 years. Here's a picture of 75% complete. 22-ton buckets of concrete were poured 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every 5 minutes for 3 years, totaling over 80,000 truckloads of concrete. If you lined up 80,000 80,000 truckloads of concrete end to end, the line would be long enough to take you from here all the way to Chicago. And that's a total of 750,000 cubic yards of concrete. It was an enormous undertaking to construct the 22 individual solid concrete monoliths. That's what each of these towers are. There's 22 of them, 175 feet high, that constitute the Mount Morris Dam. In this photo, the construction is almost complete. The dam builders were just finishing up the operations tower that's on the left-hand side of the photo. That's where the elevator is, and if you've been on a tour, that's where we go right inside the dam by entering the operations tower and taking it down through the structure. You can see the spillway or the overflow area that's highlighted with arrows in the photo. And of course the function of the spillway is for water to flow over the top, kind of like a cascade, or in a worst case scenario type situation, that water could flow over the top of the dam. The last bucket of concrete was placed in October 1951. You can see in the photo, everyone's kind of bundled up. It looks a little bit chilly there. And the dam was considered complete in early summer 1952. Now here's a more recent image of the dam taken from the upstream side. So this is the vertical face, so the water flows towards the dam. This is the area that would be holding back the water if we're preventing flooding. This is the spillway, and the water could flow over the top. Mount Morris Dam was designed to be very big and very strong. It's tall. It's about 245 feet from top to bottom, which would be like a 25-story skyscraper. So you could take the dam, fit it right in the skyline in downtown Rochester. It would fit right in. The dam spans the gorge to over 1,000 feet across, which is longer than 3 football fields. Yeah, it's really humongous. At the base of the dam, there are 9 tunnelways or conduits. You can see the openings here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's where water can flow through the dam. In each of the 9 tunnelways or conduits, there are 2 gates. They're 2 2-inch thick steel blades that can go down to stop the water, and that's when it's going to start to build up in the canyon. Or they're open to allow water to go through, and those are what the Army Corps of Engineers uses to control the water flowing through the dam. The Mount Morris Dam operated successfully for 20 years. So remember, it was constructed in 48 to 52. And the events of June 20th through 26, 1972 were the true test of the structure for the first time. So this is the start of what we have known as Hurricane Agnes. So on June 15th, 1972, the storm event began as a tropical depression that developed near Cozumel off the Yucatan coast of Mexico. And then the storm intensified and became Hurricane Agnes when it hit Central Florida area, or the center of northern Florida. June 20th, it weakened to a tropical depression as it passed through Georgia and South Carolina, producing torrential rains in the Carolina mountains. June 21st, it was rejuvenated to a tropical storm. So it gained more force and momentum and moisture as it moved near Virginia. So it continued to head north. And then on June 22nd, the storm veered west and passed over the southern tier of New York, where it was absorbed by a deep extratropical low pressure system. And then you can see here on the 23rd and 24th where it did a couple of curlicues and U-turns around and dominated the weather here in western New York for June 23rd and June 24th. And then it headed on up north through to Maine. In the Genesee Basin, The maximum recorded rainfall was 13.72 inches, with a maximum daily amount of 6.57 inches on the 21st of June, and that was in Wellsville. That's an absolutely tremendous amount of rain and resulted in the most destructive widespread flooding event in the record of the eastern United States. And one thing to think about when you're thinking about the actual storm hitting this area or the Genesee Basin is that even before the storm came here, when we were talking about that storm route and all of that heavy rain, by the time the actual rainfall got here, the area was so saturated because it had been raining here a week leading up to it that there was nowhere for that water to go. And so these are, this is a map that shows, you can see like recorded rainfall stations. So let's see, Wellsville was recorded with the highest amount, that was 6.57 inches in one day. That's a lot. And then these are all estimations. So it was a ton of rain, just a ton of rain. This graph depicts the accumulated rainfall at Wellsville. So that's, let's see, Wellsville is this line right here. You can see this is the accumulated rainfall in inches. So starting at 0 and going up to 14 inches. And then these are the dates. So June 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th. And so you can see Wellsville got hammered. I don't know how else to say it. It got absolutely hammered. And then Mount Morris is here. Also pretty substantial, but nothing near Wellsville. And then this is Rochester. So yeah, pretty incredible amounts of rainfall. And that's depicting June 20th through 25th. In short order, nearly the entire footprint of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, what we would call the Buffalo District, were declared disaster areas. So that's, let's see, here's Buffalo, here's, let's see, I'm trying to, it's a little bit small. Okay, here's Geneseo, Warsaw, Mount Morris. Okay, so we're right in here. So you can see, I mean, all this orange is what was considered disaster area. And it's all along the Great Lakes Basin and for the entire northeastern, western and northeastern of New York. And certainly the entire Genesee River Basin. There was widespread flood damage upstream of Letchworth Gorge. This is a picture of Portageville, right at the bridge, where we all go over to go to the park or go to Nunde and go to Portageville. You can see that here's a sign welcoming you to Livingston County. And folks standing there just in awe. I know just before we were getting started, a lot of folks were mentioning that they remember this and, standing on the edge of the river or standing on the edge of the gorge and looking down at the water. And I'm sure it was just overwhelming and even hard to comprehend. When I looked at this photo, the thing that struck me was that someone parked their car, looks like an awesome car, right there, and they don't really have it parked for a fast getaway. It's just kind of like, and you can see how close the water is. And I wish this was on the 23rd of June. This photo was taken the 23rd of June. So this is not even at the height of the storm event. So the water's still rising. So they should probably back that car up a little bit and get it up the hill a ways. At this point on the 23rd, headwater gauges in Scioto and Wellsville were wiped out, and that was the first day of what we would consider the flood event on the 23rd. So those stream gauges or headwater gauges, those are very important to give us information about how much water is headed our way, and because the water came up so quickly, they were destroyed. Yes, ma'am?
Didn't Corning get hit pretty hard too?
Yes, so the
Hurricane
flood
Agnes.
event was for the entire Northeast, so not just the Genesee River Valley, so that would be the Susquehanna watershed there, and yes, they were hit very hard, Corning was, yes ma'am, for sure. Here we've got this is Middle Falls, and this again was the 23rd of June. And so at this point, the inflow to the Mount Morris Dam Reservoir was spectacular. And this image was taken by William Taylor on June 23rd, 1972, right at Middle Falls in Letchworth State Park. Wow, I was just there the other day. It was a beautiful, peaceful place. And you can see in this picture, it was serious, torrential. This was a scene at Lower Falls on June 23rd. Yeah, someone knew right away this is Lower Falls, yep. Now this is the footbridge at Lower Falls. The water's flowing right over it. That's how high it was, and that's June 23rd again. So those flood waters rushed beneath and over the Lower Falls Bridge. Flows through the dam were restricted to reduce the risk of flooding, but the system was overwhelmed. Downstream areas were flooding even without any contribution from that upper parts of the watershed that we were just looking at, that we talked about, Wellsville getting hit so hard and Portageville getting so much rain. The reservoir filled rapidly. This is June 24th, looking upstream. So this is the spillway. That's that operations tower. The water's flowing this way. This is the 24th. You can see there's the Hog's Back. I don't know if anyone's been to that overlook right there. There's the Hog's Back is nearly underwater. You can see the tops of the trees. And the reservoir had gone from empty to nearly full in just a couple of days. This is June 25th, 1972, and this is looking toward the High Banks area of the park.
What are these pictures from? Are they actual Corps of Engineers pictures, or are they in a book somewhere, or something that we can actually find and look at?
Yeah, you know, I found, I'll have to get back to you on this one, but I think I found this on the Letchworth State Park, or no, excuse me, the Geneseo Library archives,
Okay.
and it's available online. And I can send that, or if you give me your contact information, I can send
That'd be
you
great. Thank you.
the link of how to get that. I know the pictures are really impressive.
We took some pictures just like that, but they have
Did you
disappeared
really?
over time, yes. 50 years ago, oh, yeah.
So yeah, so here we go. So the Army Corps of Engineers operated the dam with two major objectives: avoid the spillway overflow and schedule outflows to minimize downstream impacts, meaning to minimize downstream flooding. And so here you can see we're reaching the tippy top. This is about 4 feet from going over the top of the spillway. There's that operations tower. That's where, if you've been on a tour, you've gone in the dam, you walk out on here, you go inside the operations tower and into that big freight elevator, just to give you an idea. And then this is that north parapet on the Letchworth side. So we're pretty full right there, just about to the top. And so there were some complications during this operation. that made release decisions difficult. So we were filling up, rising at 1.3 feet every hour. I want to say I've got some notes right here about was. Okay, so just to give you an idea, June 21st, we were 5% full. Okay, so it went up 30 feet. Went up 30 feet in the first day. That was the 21st. The 22nd of June, it went up 60 feet. So at that point, we were 43% full. That was by midnight on the 23rd. And then it went up 50 more feet by that was the 22nd, midnight on the 23rd, up 50 more feet. And then at that point, we were 85.2% full. And then by the 25th of June at 6 p.m., we were at our highest at 96% full. It was 170.8 feet deep. So it happened fast. This was just in, counting the hours, basically, going up 3 feet every hour. And so we realized that we were sure to go over the top of the dam, and that there was going to be a need for controlled releases, meaning using those conduits or those tunnelways at the base of the dam to release the minimum amount of water possible in order to avoid the water going over the top of the dam. You can imagine that we all know the reason that we wouldn't want water to go over the top is, you can see, it's kind of better in this picture, all the large amounts of debris that are floating on top of the water. If that were to go over the top of the dam, you know that it's going to damage downstream structure. So we're thinking about other bridges. You can think about the bridge right in Mount Morris. It's not designed to hold back large amounts of debris with rushing water. It would break that bridge. All that debris would go to the 390 overpass, would break that. You see where I'm going with this. So we really did not want water to go over the top of the dam, and part of it has to do with all of that debris. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that we had lack of inflow data. So our Portageville and SIO gauges were wiped out on June 22nd. That was at the start of the storm. And so we did not have reliable information that was that we had confidence in to trust in order to make decisions. So it was a tough go. And so the ratings in Wellsville were used just kind of as a proxy, but we didn't have any hard numbers on how much water was coming in.
Who made the decision to let the water out gradually? Did the Army Corps of Engineers make that decision?
The Army Corps of Engineers, yep. And so the complications were the lack of inflow data, because those gauges were wiped out upstream. And so we knew there was a lot of water coming, but it was difficult to come up with exactly how much. And so what you had are, what they were using was backwater computations to come up with some ideas. And the thing some ideas of how much water was coming our way. And the thing you have to remember is, there had never been flows this high. Remember, this is the worst or most extreme flood event in written history for the entire Northeast. And so this was unprecedented. It had never happened before. So additionally, there were Army Corps staff at the steel bridge in Wellsville doing what they call bucket tests to try to get an estimate on how much water was flowing through there, to come up with some projections of how much more water, or how fast we could figure that it was going to fill. And of course, there was a large amount of debris behind the dam. And then also, of course, when you have terrible weather, you also usually have a lot of wind. And anyone that's spent any time along the gorge area, you know it gets windy up there. And so imagine all of this water, all of the debris on top, and then tons of wind, you know, whistling down the gorge there. And what was surprising was the wave action. So you had waves occurring on top of that floodwater, lapping up on the dam, also carrying all that debris, right? And then in the midst of this, the Army Corps received a phone call from the Lucidol company in Peffard, calling on the 23rd of June, concerned that any higher flow discharges could risk releases of toxic chemicals. And at this point, we realized, let's see, on June 20, we realized that we were going to go beyond capacity, and that the spillway would overtop by Sunday, June 25th. So on June 22nd, without the upstream gauges, the Army Corps of Engineers estimated that the inflow from the low steel bridge in Wellsville, where I mentioned they were doing what they call a bucket test, the inflow is estimated at 90,000 CFS. 90,000 cubic feet per second. And I jotted down what the inflow today, currently May 22nd at Wellsville, is 1,780 CFS today. This was 90,000 CFS. At this point, the reservoir was going up already at 60% capacity. This was on June 22nd, and it was going up 3 feet per hour at Mount Morris Dam. At this rate, the spillway was going to overtop on the evening of June 25th. That was the projection. Following additional analysis, it was determined that the water needed to be released from the reservoir, and evacuation warnings issued for residents in the lower Genesee River area. And we couldn't start releasing until we got the message out to the people in the downstream areas. And so we had to wait 24 hours from the time that the evacuation message went out. And so releasing the target, and when we started, was June 23rd, and the target was 10,000 CFS. Remember, there's 90,000 CFS coming at us. And so due to that wave action that I talked about, the goal was to keep the depth 3 feet below the spillway crest, so that that debris wasn't overtopping and going to downstream areas. So at that level, it would be 172 feet deep. That was the that was our goal there, to not go beyond that. Just want to make sure. This photograph here is of the flatlands surrounding the Genesee River west of SUNY Geneseo campus during the flood of '72. It was the result of Hurricane Agnes. Jones Hall is in the foreground, with Livingston and Monroe Halls behind or beyond, and Mary Jemison Dining Hall. Yeah. The photograph was taken on June 24th, 1972, from the library.
And there was a number, 755 something, the number of the reference book that it's in. The number was on on the photograph. So you can look up that book, 755 and
Oh,
whatever.
okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So as far as gate operations, we started on June 23rd. So remember the warning, the evacuation warning went out on the 22nd, gave a 24-hour notice for downstream residents to evacuate. And we began releasing at 6 p.m. on the June 23rd, 8,100 cubic feet per second. We increased on June 23rd at 11 p.m., increased to 15,500 CFS and sustained that for 3 hours. So that went from, what's 2,100 hours? 9 p.m. until midnight. And then at midnight on the 24th morning, however you want to say that, June 24th, we backed down to 8,000 CFS. And then by 1 p.m. on June 24th, we were down to 2,250 CFS. So backing down as soon as we could.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is that where the water is there, is that where the aircraft, the historical?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good call.
The museum is down there?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, that's right.
Upper left-hand corner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's where the aircraft museum is. Was it there in 72? I wouldn't know. I don't know.
The buildings were there.
Yeah,
The
the
buildings
buildings were
were
there,
there.
but not all of what they have now.
Okay.
That's coming up soon, the air show.
The operation of Mount Morris Dam virtually spared the lower Genesee River Basin from major disaster. Although there was still widespread destruction downstream of Mount Morris Dam, and nearly $2.9 million in flood damages were realized across the basin, the operation of the dam prevented an estimated $210 million in further damages and potential loss of lives. The results of the operation, no debris was spilled over the top. Remember, we talked about the maximum outflow was 15,500 cubic feet per second. That was sustained for 3 hours. Avon reached 7 feet over flood stage.
That's what I wanted to ask a question about. My mother, when she was here last, mentioned that, and it seemed like nobody really knew about, there was a gate in Avon that got
There's-
opened?
There's not a gate in Avon.
There isn't one in Avon. Is there one along that stretch? Because she thought she heard something about a gate down there somewhere being opened.
I wonder if she's referring to the structure that's at the north end of Canisius Lake.
Possibly, because we lived.
Because that would flow, right, I remember you saying that you lived in Canisius Lake, that, you know, we all know there's a flood control structure or a water control structure at the north end by Vitale Park, or Vitale Park, however you want to say it, at Canisius Lake. And when I was studying up on this, I read a small portion about that event on Canisius, and there was a lot of back and forth with lake residents about wanting to open up gates on Canisius Creek. Essentially, that's what that is, in order to release water out of Canisius Lake. And eventually, after going back and forth, the Canisius Lake Association did open and release some water. So maybe that's what she's thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's probably
Yeah.
it.
So, yes, there were flood damages, 2.89 million, so you could say 2.9 million. But damages prevented were 210 million. So, this hydrograph illustrates the effects of the dam and, allows you to imagine the inundation that would have occurred had the dam not been there. So this is the event. So we've got June 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. This is the discharge in the thousands of cubic feet per second. Remember we talked about there being 90,000 coming out of Wellsville. And so this is assumed no dam. This is what the flow would have looked like coming down into those lower reaches. So peaking midday on the 23rd and then dropping off quickly. And then with the dam being there, gradually rising, having a sustained high flow, and then dropping back down. So, it helped slow down that water, would be one way to say it. It's pretty incredible to see it in that visual illustration there. While the dam was certainly tested by the flood of 72, it held its ground and survived. The dam has continually operated since and has prevented over $3.9 billion in flood damages since its construction in 52. The above photos are actually from 1993, when the waters behind the dam came within 14 feet of going over the top. It honestly doesn't look that different than 72, does it? So it would be a 10-foot difference. And this was from rainy weather and a fast snowmelt, but this was in the spring of 1993. That's what these pictures are from. And this photo was taken this year, February 25th, 2022. In this photo, the pool was approximately 115 feet deep. So it was 115 feet deep behind the dam and was at nearly 40% capacity. And that was a result of snowmelt with a bunch of rain. And we had a very wet and busy late winter, early spring. At the Mount Morris Dam, we were holding back a lot of water for almost 2 months straight. So, so it tells you the dam is even more relevant than ever, with downstream areas becoming more and more populated, and residential neighborhoods and businesses being constructed in those areas that historically are floodplains. So we're still doing our work. And of course we know that the Mount Morris Dam is publicly accessible. Every summer visitors are invited to join a ranger guided tour of the dam, and we offer them every day right through the end of October. And we do those where we take you right down inside the dam and show you how it works. And they're every day at 2, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 11 and 2. And our big news this year is that you can reserve those online in advance, so you have tickets. So even during the summertime when it gets quite busy, you can secure your spots ahead of time.
Is it still slippery and moist down in there?
It's still the same dam, yeah. So depending on what level
Yep.
you're on, yep. Some areas are moist, yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm ready for questions. Yes, sir.
Seems like it would be a fine line. You said it was 40% full this spring. So holding
Oh, yeah.
water back to prevent downstream flooding, but yet making sure you have reservoir space for any unexpected storm.
That's exactly right. So he's kind of referring to how do you know how much to hold or how much to allow it to go through. And the Army Corps has a team of hydrologists. So those are engineers that are experts on water and how it moves across the earth. And that's their call. And so they are looking at a lot of information throughout the entire watershed. So for about 5% in New York State, that's the Genesee River Valley, 2,500 square miles that drains into the Genesee River. And they are doing a lot of data collection, and they put that information into computer programs that they've designed to create different projections based on different scenarios in order to make those decisions. And so one of the things that is a little counterintuitive, I think, is that you think during a flood event or when we're holding back water like that, that the best scenario is just shut down the dam, don't let any more water go through. And it's really, in some ways, the opposite. We are slowing down the water, but we're also trying to allow as much water to go through without causing flooding in downstream areas, because just as you mentioned, the fun thing about weather is that it is very unpredictable, and usually these storm events come one after another and you don't know what's coming around the corner. So we want to conserve that space in the canyon for unforeseen weather events that might be creeping up around the corner. And let's see, I was looking at, just to give you an idea, that photograph that I had from this past February, where, let's see, what date was this? This was the 25th. Well, so in this particular instance, this event started on February 18th. So on February 17th, the water was about 10 feet deep behind the dam. It was just, looked like the regular river, just flowing right through, just like you see it, maybe 2/3 of the time when you look down in the canyon. And then we had a bunch of rain and snow melt, and by February 18th, so by the very next day, it had gone up to 10, 15, about 45 feet deep. Overnight, yep, it went up 45 feet overnight. That was just in February. And then by the 25th, which I think, yep, that's this photo, it was up to that 60% capacity. And so you imagine this event for us started really on the 17th. We start seeing, weather's coming, the temperature's going to go up, it's getting a little bit rainy, and then it starts happening fast. And this event went on until, the end of March 25th. So from February 17th to March 25th this year, we were holding back water, and quite a bit actually. And remember, we were talking about the flood of 72, or the Hurricane Agnes event in 72. At our height, we were letting out 15,500 cubic feet per second, and that was for a 3-hour stretch of time to get that water level down, to preserve that space in the canyon as the water just kept rising. So in this event, this past winter, at our height, March 13th, we were letting out a little over 6,500 CFS, cubic feet per second. So a fraction of, what had happened historically during Agnes.
What's the protocol for cleaning sediment out from behind the dam?
So on the upstream side for cleaning that out. So he's wondering about sediment buildup on the upstream side of the dam. So on this side of the dam, the side where you usually see that small channel of water going through. So we don't remove sediment from that upstream section. We do not remove it, but every year we do dredging. So we plan that during the same time that we're doing debris removal. So that's late July, early August, the driest time of the year. August historically is the only month of the year where we haven't had major flooding on the Genesee. So, knock on plastic, recycle plastic, or whatever this is, we'll keep planning it for August time. And during that time when we do that debris removal, we also do some dredging. And so what you can think about is, remember at the base of the dam, there's those 9 conduits where water can go through. So moving sediment from that area, almost like a trench, in front of the dam, and pushing it back up onto that silt bar. And because we have such a heavy clay concentrate in the sediment that's in the dam, carried along this stretch of river because of all the shale in the canyon, it stays in place. It stays on that silt bar. You know, shockingly, if it was sand, it would just move, but it stays on that silt bar. But we do that every year. Yeah.
So
What
is it-
else? Anyone else have a question?
I live up right near the dam. And then
You live where?
up near the dam.
Oh, cool.
And when I look down there's it looks like a big extension cord or something. It's like is it keeping the debris?
Oh yeah, the debris boom. So let me see if I think I can see it. Okay. So we're talking about, I can barely make it out here, but right here there's a yellow thing that goes across the gorge, and it's a debris boom. So there's where it's anchored in. I think Joe's gonna hit the lights. Yeah, you can kind of make it out. You can see all the debris behind it. And that thing is like a heavy duty lane divider in a swimming pool. It's plastic with foam inside, and it floats on top of the water to catch the floatable debris. So mainly you're thinking about trees and logs. Each of the links in that boom are 8 feet long. It's really huge. And to give you an idea, when you go to the dam and you're looking over at the view there, where the boom anchors in to the gorge right there, to give you an idea, that's the same height as the spillway. So when you look out at that, you can imagine that would have been about the height during Hurricane Agnes, or even during the floods of '93. We were holding back all that water, yeah. What other questions?
Juliana, have they added any more gauges upstream on any of the tributaries into the
Oh.
Genesee to kind of give you a better indication of
That's a
higher
good
flow?
question. Since '72, I don't know that they've added stream gauges, but they have improved the
The two that
the
were wiped
two.
out?
Yeah, and so typically when we have these gauge wells or these gauge houses, we call them, they're those brick buildings. They look like something out of the Three Little Pigs, the one that built the brick house. And inside of there are typically 2 gauges, one that's managed and maintained by the U.S. Geologic Survey, and then another one that's maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And you'll see those all over the country, on streams and on rivers. And so it wasn't that we didn't have enough gauges, it was just that the ones that were there got wiped out right on the second day of the storm. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You can dial up those gauges. I kayak. And
Yes.
At Pine Creek, Tineless, and Genesee River. There's lots of them, but there's
Yes.
some that don't tell you anything.
Mhm.
It only moves about 5 inches in a big storm and when it dries up. But if I use the Portageville gauge,
Mhm.
all the southern tier, the highest I paddled was 13 feet. 9 you can get through.
I was going to say, I bet you 13 was really fast.
Yeah, that
The
was.
trip was over quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's stream gauges, yep, and you can look those up online. You could just do a search for National Weather Service, Genesee River gauges, and you can see the hydrograph there. You can see what's happening in real time. Mhm.
They
Yep.
predict the weather on some of them. They'll tell you what weather's coming and what the river might do in the next couple of days, which is interesting.
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely correct. What else have you got? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of damage downstream
Yes.
from here, and another factor in that,
Mhm.
the Erie Canal assists in shunting water away. We had just moved, in fact, our property still in it borders the canal, and
Oh, wow.
we were very relieved to know that during that time. Other rivers, the one that goes through Corning, I know was badly affected, as well as Olean, and that's still upstream, really.
Corning, yes, and
Yeah,
Painted
although that
Post
might
is
be
kind of bad.
flowing into the Genesee.
Those don't go into the Genesee, so that's a separate watershed. That's a Susquehanna.
It would be, but still.
Oh yeah, no, oh yeah, of course. We talked about that. There was major flooding for the entire Northeast. Yes, yes. And it's something that if you live along the river or in this area at all, you don't forget what happened. It was, the worst flooding in written history. It was a tremendous event. It never happened before.
At the end of the flood, when all the water was kind of brought back down and you could get
Yeah.
actually in at the low level, did you find anything interesting? Is there any recollection of things in the bottom of the...
That's a great question.
It's I know, right?
Well, in the last presentation, there was mention of maybe a house or a shed or something that went and disappeared downriver. I'm just curious if it all ends
Yeah.
up down there below the dam.
I know, right? We so it took about a month to release the water, at that rate. So, and I read that on July 4th was when it was officially declared not a disaster area. Like the flood event was over, but it took until the end of July to get back to normal river flow. As far as any surprises I wish I had a better, more exciting. Who would probably know that is Tom Cook. Tom, come back. I don't have any really good, exciting answers. I always laugh, in the springtime we'll always see lots of like basketballs and soccer balls and stuff down there, and you just imagine like a sad kid, just from Wellsville, like, oh, the ball went into the river and there it
There's some
goes.
picnic
Yeah.
tables the teenagers have upended up in
Oh
there.
my goodness.
Yeah.
We had an interesting event from that. There were a lot of debris was left all along the way, I guess, for many, many weeks after. We went down there about 6 months after the event, not thinking too much about what was happening, and we bought a musical instrument. And that musical instrument, the panels on it were made from a dresser that had floated down from the flood, and it was kind of an interesting thing to come up with.
What kind of musical instrument? You're being very cryptic.
It's a mountain dulcimer.
Okay.
Yeah, Dawson.
Wow.
That's right.
72's flooding pretty much bankrupt most of the railroads in the Northeast. They couldn't recover. And
Really?
That was a government action to create a Conrail to take over the surviving railroads.
Okay.
I did take
And kind of
Pennsylvania.
consolidate?
Consolidated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Because of the bridges that were wiped out and the right-of-ways that were gone. I did take a trip to Pennsylvania right after the storm, and we got as far into Pennsylvania as we could before all the bridges and railroads were just lying in the fields. Rails were just spiraled where the water had carried them away.
oh my goodness. Yeah, it's hard to,
A national event.
yes, yes.
When you
Yes, sir.
mentioned Lucedale, standing on Whiskey Bridge as the water was rising, late June, fields had been planted and sprayed,
Yes,
and the river smelled like a chemical mix tank.
yes.
Also upstream, south of Wellsville and Stannard's, it washed into an oil refinery, and it made the EPA's top 100 list for PCBs.
Oh my goodness.
Now, where is Whiskey Bridge?
It's just south of Portageville, the Portageville Bridge. Did you say it's the next one up, right?
Just south of Portageville,
Yeah.
half a mile.
I don't know, maybe half a mile?
Yeah, it's really close by there. Did you have something?
Yeah, I lived, at that point, I was in high school, and we lived on the Tonawanda Creek.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a farm, and our cows were across the road. So we had cows swimming. It came so quickly in the Tonawanda.
And was this outside of Batavia?
Alexander.
Alexander, okay, yeah.
So it just came, so
Oh
it
my
took our
goodness.
road, we were like a little island, but that was one memory, is trying to get all the cattle from one side of the road into the barn where it was not really as safe, but it was safer than where they were. And cows can swim.
I think they can.
I remember going to Portageville late in the afternoon, almost dark, and seeing cows go over the bridge.
Wow.
Cows, pigs, trailers, everything was going over the bridge.
That's,
I missed
yeah,
that
that's
part.
what
Yeah.
I had read about, just
House
livestock, house
House
trailers,
trailers.
propane tanks were a
Yeah,
difficult
everything was just.
situation.
But cows were trying to
Tractors.
swim, but they weren't doing very well.
Oh my goodness,
The water was rushing so bad.
wow.
But I mean, we stood there for probably 10 minutes and counted maybe 15 cows. in 10
Oh
minutes.
my goodness.
That's how fast they were going.
Wow.
There are more cows
There were
than
probably cows.
in this part of the region, there's more cows than people, so I'm
Yeah.
not surprised at that at all. I don't remember seeing any of that, but I do believe that that's absolutely gotta be the weirdest sight. Now, in the last program, the gentleman was saying that the weirdest sight he ever saw was rowboats up and down on farmland and things, and people in the towns in rowboats. Well, we had the same thing on Canisius Lake. We had people in rowboats getting animals and children and everything out of their houses and taking them
Yes.
up to higher ground. So it was
Wow.
really interesting. Canisius Lake moved.
Yes.
It was great. 3 days after we got out of school, we were all ticked off. Started our vacation really badly.
That's why I've heard so many people's stories about their graduation got messed up, because you think of it, right at the end of June, third week in June, or their prom, or,
Weddings.
yeah, weddings, exactly.
Any of you who weren't here for our first part of this program need to make sure that you look at our YouTube channel to see what happened in Portageville and at the park. Rodney here, Rodney Graham, talks about all the hogs that you saved, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Hogs.
I don't think you lost any, right?
That's correct.
Right.
About 400.
It was a major effort.
They don't like to get held.
They got herded.
Yeah, there's videos that they had, the family had, that are were part of the program. And, it's available on YouTube and on our channel.
Jules, one more question.
Yeah.
With,
Any other questions? If not,
with,
Oh, Alex is hitting me up, he's got
Alex,
another
you got
hard
another
one.
question?
with 72,
Yeah.
then to 93,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned the increased development that's happening downriver. Is there any other plans projected for the dam in the coming years or decade that, I don't know, like for preparation or if events continue and we see maybe another 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, heavy rain events?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Not that I'm aware of. I do know that we have, in the past years, as the structure ages, we have additional data collection that we do on the structure as far as uplift pressure, so water pressure on the dam, as far as movement of the structure, tilt, and seismic activity, as well as recently taking new core samples, so
Yeah.
around the curtain wall areas,
How would they repair
down at the
cracks and
toe of the
such?
dam, because just to collect more information about what's happening in the structure. It's 70 years old at this point. It's still rates in good condition. You know, it has the highest rating overall as far as a national rating. But as far as, you know, like building it taller or bigger, I haven't heard anything along those lines, but you never know.
I doubt that would ever happen because it would back up the river and compromise the falls area, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, so to give you an idea, if we're full, Lower Falls is underwater. Remember, we saw that in the picture, and that's our maximum capacity.
Correct.
At that point, it's going over the spillway. If we were to build it taller, say, you're right, it would fill that waterfall area. And something important to realize about the upstream section of the river from Mount Morris Dam to Portageville, that 20-mile stretch, is that it's protected by something called the Genesee River Protection Act that was passed in 1989. And so what that is protecting is the scenic, recreational, cultural, ecological, and the geologic value of the canyon. And so that's why when you see the dam and there's just some water flowing through and everyone says, is it dry or why are you holding back more water? It's because that upstream section of the river is protected and it's operated as a wild and scenic river. We're mandated by Congress to only interfere with the flow of the water when we're doing something related to flood prevention. And that goes back to the lovely waterfall area that you mentioned. So, of course, we know that when William Pryor Letchworth donated that portion of land around the Glen Iris and the waterfall area to the state to become a state park, part of his requirement was that those waterfalls needed to remain unimpeded in perpetuity for, forever and ever, of course you would say. And so you're right, when you are interfering with that, there's a conflict there. And so that's where that upstream river, that was part of the push to get that protected. But you're absolutely right. The waterfalls are protected also.
I think that was a consideration when designing the dam. It's, this is how high it can be. Back it up to lower falls, and that's where it stops.
Right, and it was based on historic weather data. Yeah.
This might not be in your area of expertise, but
I seem pretty smart so far, so
what-
let's see how I do.
You're doing great. I heard somewhere about how long it took concrete in the inner parts of the dam to cure. Do you know? It was a long time.
Yeah,
Years.
so it's like the way that I like to think about concrete curing is thinking about sort of in geologic terms, like the rock cycle. So when you make concrete, you're using limestone from Leroy, of course, best quality ever on the planet. So you're using limestone, you're using sand, and then like an aggregate. So you could say gravel or something. And you are combining those ingredients and adding a certain amount of water. That's your recipe, right? And you're taking those essentially stones and turning them into rock elements and turning them into a new rock, right? Known as concrete. And so as far as concrete curing, I like to put it in those terms that you're thinking of geology, you're thinking of a rock, and we know that rocks move slowly, right? That timeline is very slow. And so you're thinking on a molecular level of a water molecule being present, right? Which would indicate that the rock, also known as concrete, is still curing. So I don't have an actual number for you, but for sure if you stick your finger in the middle of the dam, it's not going to be like Jello pudding pops. It is solid, but you could say technically it's still curing because there's still water present. Yeah.
Alex asked if there was any plans to reinforce the dam, or forget exactly how the question was posed, but
It was a hard one, and so any of the questions that Alex has asked me have been difficult. I owe him, yeah.
there was a movement to put another dam in at Portageville.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And
In the 60s, I can remember handing out petitions against it. You remember that?
that's right, I was trying to remember when it was. But Reggie Gross, Ed Wilmot, the citizens got together and
And was that was for a utility? That was a utility company, right?
Yeah.
think
I don't
it
remember
Yeah,
the
the power, it was a
specifics.
power company.
was a power company.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was
that's
not
okay. I know
the, it was
better.
not the Army Corps of Engineers, but yeah, so the idea is to build an additional dam. It's not the Army Corps' idea, but a utility company's idea to build an additional dam in the upstream area in Portageville. That was one of the many ideas that was tossed around throughout the decades in order to help with flood prevention. So at the dam, we could hold back or be half full all the time in order to add turbines into the dam to create hydropower. And this is when people really went bananas. And the result was the Genesee River Protection Act that we were talking about earlier being passed in 1989. And that was an ixnay on the power nay because we needed to protect the characteristics of the canyon and also obviously preserve the flow of those waterfalls.
My question, I guess, if that,
Yeah.
if there was a dam and built, and then you had, regardless of now or in the future, God forbid, a bunch of water coming again, you know, if that breached in any way, with all that water, if you're going back to Houghton area or Canandaigua, way back, that water's gonna back up if there's a dam in Portageville. That's an awful lot of water coming into Rochester. So, you know, I'm just thinking of the breach, anything can happen today, I mean, we've seen it. I was wondering if they ever talked about that.
Well, and just to give you an idea, if you're, well, it doesn't exist, so I don't know that it's been talked about. You know, it's not, there is not a dam there, so I don't know. But for example, if this gives you any sort of visual, I don't know how many of you have been to Rushford Lake? Rushford Lake? Okay, yeah, you know where they have the Canandaigua Dam? That was originally a Rochester Gas and Electric dam. And is that where you guys live?
No, that's where her folks.
Oh, okay,
Folks on
yeah.
Rushford.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And so for example, if you took Rushford Lake, you know, in the summertime when it's filled up for recreation, you know, that's what we know that lake is for, and just emptied it, because, you know, that goes into the Genesee River, and then it heads towards the dam, towards Mount Morris, towards Rochester. So if we were at normal river flow, so not holding back water, like what we see in this picture, right? And we took Rushford Lake and just had it totally full and just released it. Behind the dam, we could hold 10 Rushford Lakes. And that would bring us up to about capacity. So I don't know if that gives you any sort of visual on that.
Rushford Lake is a relatively deep lake for its size.
Yeah, yes.
It is. It's
We
right
were
there by
told,
the dam, 100 plus feet.
we were told one time when the river came up so fast, the second time that they were releasing water from Rushford was, you ever hear that?
Wait, what's the question?
Releasing water, he said, from Rushford.
Oh, Rushford releases water all the
Well,
time.
the water, we had a flood, and then it went down, and all of a sudden this water came up really quick.
Oh, and it was Rushford releasing. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, Rushford releases water frequently. And when they, you know, they draw down in the fall time, right? Of course. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I am, because I work at the dam, and you're right, we receive that water. Yeah, so they'll draw down. And so when we do have heavy rain events, yeah, Rushford releases water, and we get that water too.
But that was a little more than they wanted to or should have, I think.
Oh, okay.
That's my belief, that's what I heard.
Okay. And
I heard
Rushford is operated.
Trees were in there, so.
Okay, Rushford is operated, or I should say Canandaigua Dam. That's the dam that's, you know, at the end of Canandaigua, or I should say the top of Canandaigua Creek, also known as Rushford Lake now because it's dammed. That is not an Army Corps dam. It is operated by the Rushford Lake Association. So it's a private community association that operates that dam. So as far as their operations or, you know, individual incidents related to their gates, I can't speak to that
That was operated by the
specifically.
RG&E.
What's that, sir?
I believe it was operated by the RG&E at that time.
It was originally constructed by Rochester Gas and Electric. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
I think what Dave
I don't
was-
understand.
I think what Dave was referring to was a flood that happened. We got flooded. A log got stuck in their gate and they couldn't close the gate. So the flooding occurred.
Okay. I don't know where.
Oh dear. Just south of Portugal is where we are. And
Oh, okay, so
this would have
oh,
been back in the
I'm
late
understanding
60s,
what you're saying
the
now.
late 60s probably.
Okay, so unrelated to Agnes, unrelated to
Yes.
anything, just there was an
Correct.
incident at one point, and it
Although-
had to do with Canada Dam
Yeah.
releasing water, maybe?
Although we were told to evacuate during Agnes, because we were told that Canada Dam had broken.
Oh my goodness,
Willie
okay,
Cartwright,
which wasn't
if
true.
any of you remember Willie and Bertie
Oh
Cartwright.
my gosh.
Willie worked for RG&E, and he came, and we're fairly up the home farms, pretty much off the river, but we were told to evacuate because Rushford Dam had broken. So we went up by my sister's house and waited for a big wave of water that never happened.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Wow, that sounds terrifying.
I think that Portisville Dam that they were talking about building, which everybody around here obviously objected to.
Yeah.
I think that was, if it was going to be built, I think, wouldn't it have flooded Fillmore? I think it was going to back up water.
I thought they said Portisville.
That's what I thought too, that they thought there'd be a lake right there in Portisville.
Yeah, it went back up to Fillmore, yes.
I think it went
Yeah.
back all the way up to Fillmore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a lot of different proposals throughout the years involving anywhere up to 3 different dams, or making the Mount Morris Dam higher, or, just all different kinds of ideas. Not from the Army Corps, these are from utility companies, electric companies.
Does the Mount Morris Dam have any say or control over how much water gets released out of Rushford? Do you have any say or control in that at all?
We don't, so we receive whatever they're sending. Yep.
Is there any standards for a privately owned dam that has to be maintained to a certain reliability?
Let's see, that's a tough one, and I don't know specifics on Rushford Lake, but I do know a little bit of information about the dam or the water control structure that's at the north end of Canisius Lake. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. We were talking about it at right at Vital Park.
Sure.
Pizza poles, all that stuff, yeah, 3-legged pig. All that stuff's right there, the bait shop. But anyhow, so that dam in particular, that was constructed by the Army Corps of Engineers. That's an Army Corps of Engineers project right there. And the way that operates is that the Army Corps constructed that dam, and they put together an operations manual. So like those standards that you were talking about of when you have this lake level, this is what you're doing, this is the lake level that you have to maintain. And then that operation is handed over to the state to operate that. And then the state manages the Canisius Lake Association to do those gate operations and follow within that manual, that
Learn something new every
prescribed.
day. I lived there for 5
Yeah,
years.
that
I never knew
prescribed
that.
manual. And so along with that, it's called like an operations and maintenance manual. It's just a standard way to say it. And so in that is what it implies. There's standard maintenance that you have to do, and then the Army Corps does periodic inspections on the structure to make sure that it's operating in a safe way, it's operating per the manual, and also that there are not any deficiencies, and as you said, that it's safe. As far as I know, we were talking a lot about Canada Dam, and I'm just not as familiar with that particular structure and their operations. It's not related to the Army Corps. Yeah, I've been there, but it's out of my, it's out of my purview, so I'm just not really sure what the ins and outs of that particular dam. Yes, sir?
I had a question there as far as territory up in Perry. You know, you got a pretty good sized body of water just south of Perry called the Silver Lake up there.
I've heard of
And
it.
there's an outlet there that goes into the Genesee River there eventually, I think.
Yes.
Around Mount Morris there or something. I'm wondering, I'm sitting there listening, and wondering if the Army engineers have anything to do with Silver Lake, its outlet, control the lake level or whatever.
That's a good
There's a dam
question.
there,
Do you
there.
have a dam there? At Silver, do you have a dam at Silver Lake?
There's a dam there.
They have controls, there's a cement.
Is there
area.
really?
Yeah, because I kayak from the lake to Perry, it's kind of, it's full of oak trees, it's really beautiful and stuff in there, it's not very far. But I went to go under the little bridge to the lake, I couldn't paddle fast enough. And you could see a drop in a wave where they were letting out so much water. I finally had to get out, go over top and set back in. So they were definitely, that was early spring, so they must have been letting water off, so it was affecting cottages and houses.
Yeah. It sounds like a permanent spillway structure.
It must be, I was gonna actually ask the same question.
Yeah.
There is a dam right before the same road that, but, you know, they must be able to control it somehow.
I'm not sure about that. That's something I'm gonna have to research.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I know. There's always something more to learn for sure.
Well, and these ones, aren't they lower, like, more like levees than they are dams? More like to hold the water back, just to a certain area?
The ones.
That they're talking about, all these controls and things, they're not.
That's why I
something this
asked.
huge.
That's why I asked
They're
if it was
small,
just a set
small,
spillway,
yes.
or like you said, kind of a levee, so that it maintains it to a certain height, and then it's just going to naturally spill over.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm just not sure about. I'll have to look into that. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with Silver Lake.
Raise it to keep the water in the lake for the boaters and stuff also. If it was a dry year, they could hold water back. So that it has to be movable. I don't think
or it's a set spillway, and it holds water at a certain level, and if it's dry, you wait till it rains. I don't personally know.
They actually bring the water up if it's dry.
Oh, pardon me. I thought you were asking me. I didn't realize you were
sorry.
telling. Okay.
I know they can control it somehow.
Yeah.
I turn around at that point because it's all full of junk.
Okay.
Very good.
We hope you enjoyed this informative presentation. We thank Juliana Smith and the Army Corps of Engineers for the program. Be sure to tune in to Part 1 video, which can be found on our channel, Nunde History. Thank you for watching.